Hello, and welcome to the Caregiver Teleconnection. My name is Glenda Rogers, and I'm going to be your facilitator for the call this afternoon. We have with us today Dr. Jamie Huysman, and he's going to be talking about high conflict resolution relationships and its impact on you as a caregiver. Before he gets started with his presentation, let me tell you just a little bit about Dr. Jamie. Dr. Jamie Huysman built his innovative health career on the premise of necessity is the mother of invention. His belief that the resilience of the human spirit and collaboration are key to our country's health future is the core of his philosophy. He is a fierce advocate of patient-centered healthcare and a workforce in touch with their own wellness. He has almost 30 years of medical and behavioral health experience in nonprofit and for-profit corporate leadership roles. Today, he works in provider relations and governmental affairs for WellMed Medical Management, a San Antonio, Texas-based physician-owned primary clinic organization. Dr. Jamie, welcome to the call.
Thank you so much, Glenda, and thank you to everybody who's tuned in to this very, very different topic. I'm sure everybody has looked at caregiving from all perspectives. Certainly Rosalind Carter did, Mother Teresa. And we all saw this as a sacred time, sacred event, right? Where we could take care of our moms, our dads, our brothers, our sisters, where we could do what was right, we thought, in our lives. Well, for many people, that's exactly the case. Caregiving is a sacred task. It's a wonderful thing, as long as we're taking care of ourselves and taking our oxygen first. For others, like in Las Vegas, they were dealt a hand that they didn't quite count on. And that is exactly what we're going to talk about today. The hand that was dealt that you didn't quite count on. It's called high conflict caregiving, or have you stepped in TAR? Now, the acronym for TAR is toxic abusive relationship. Many of us, of course, can't even imagine, since caregiving is one of those inevitable things in our lives. We're either going to be a caregiver, we are a caregiver, we're either going to have care provided to us, but somehow caregiving will always be in our lives. Now, if we have empathy and accountability and we understand life and death and we accept and have that radical acceptance and we connect with others, it's a wonderful event. It really is, especially if a loved one is providing it. However, if things are different, and we're talking really about the elephant in the living room here, things are often different, then maybe it's not quite like that. I've often seen as a psychologist and a social worker in marriage counseling that I have moms, dads, kids, everybody coming together. And in some ways, they always try to paint the best picture of what's going on. And even us, we love a Hollywood story, right? Somebody's married 30, 40, 50 years. We say, oh, what a wonderful relationship. After time, when that relationship sometimes comes to myself or another therapist, we find out it's not quite as wonderful in Hollywood as you would think. In fact, it's sometimes what we call a hostile dependency, whereby somebody gets with somebody, and over time, without that feeling of empathy and accountability, connectiveness, having those sacred memories and things that really make us feel better, it becomes more of a cantankerous event. So today, I really wanted to talk about something that we don't ever get a chance to talk about, which is the elephant in the living room. Okay, are you actually taking care of somebody in a high conflict caregiving situation? Before we do, many of you know, as a trauma therapist, I want you to get centered. I want you to understand why you're here. Excuse me, why you're here listening to this. Let's say that. I want you to become present of who you are as a wonderful caregiver that's wants to be informed and educated, empowered, and energized. And I'd like you to go inside for yourselves here and to really look at what the why is. Why you're caregiving. I'm not going to go that deep unless you are a patient of mine. I'm going to say, what is the reason? Why did you actually tune in today? And I want you to go to the deep recesses of your soul and figure that one out. I'm going to give you 15 seconds right now with your eyes closed to start that process. Okay, I'm going to ask you all to come back to our wonderful educational session we're having today and realize that whatever you have found there is a critical, important thing. That why is what gets us up in the morning. When I'm anxious and I'm depressed and I'm a human being just like you, I'm not a Buddha. I can become that way. That little child on the back of my back there in that picture usually is my why, right? It's my why to become emotionally intelligent. That's what I'm going to ask you today to think about, this concept of emotional intelligence, because that is going to be the one way, the one path, the one avenue that's going to get you through this issue of dealing with high conflict caregiving. But I also want you to understand that caregivers often are hero children. I'm a recovering hero child. Many of the doctors and therapists I work with are hero children. I'm going to talk to you about recovering from that, because we often like to play Superman or Superwoman. But if you're being really validated outside your self-esteem by people, places, and things, that's not a great thing. I'm asking you to find your why, because internal motivation is always better than external motivation. And it's a river of life within you, okay? It's one that never runs dry. And when you have a why, a purpose, or a dream, you don't have to look outside. Literally, to know oneself is the key and critical thing about life in general. Some of you may know, because I see friends here who actually tuned in here, that I love rock and roll. So there's a song done by Metallica. And if you ever listen to it, it's called Nothing Else Matters. And the lyrics of it really talk about, if you know yourself, if you really know yourself, you can handle anything that comes your way, right? You will not take somebody's words as your definition, somebody's insult, somebody's deprecation, somebody putting you down, because you know yourself. And if you do, nothing else matters. And that's what I tell that little girl in the back of my shoulder right there. Many of you do know that I'm a dad in my 60s. It's not the AARP plan, but she's my joy. And she teaches me a lot about innocence. She also teaches me a lot about healthy connection and healthy behavior. Today, we're going to talk a little bit about more what is a toxic relationship. Okay, how to identify. And it says get out of it, but actually it's more like modifying. Many of us can't get out of things. I know I work with families, and one of them is extraordinarily toxic, and they get divorced and they have a child in between. And you just can't have that no contact, right? You have to develop what's called a modified contact strategy. Well, that's very similar for caregivers, okay? First things first, if you have somebody, and I'm going to have you go through a little bit right now in your mind. If you have somebody like this, who cares about themselves only, who lacks empathy, right? Believes that they're better than everyone around them. We have I'll get into it later, we have a diagnosis for that. We don't have a diagnosis for the rest, but these are descriptors. Or if you have somebody who's controlling everything around them and needs to be in charge of every decision, that makes you feel like you can't do anything. That often happens when somebody's out of control in their minds. We call that the controller. We also see the drama magnet, right? That's somebody who feeds off of gossip and drama. Drama seems to follow them. And if you're taking care of a loved one who loves to be that center of drama, get the long distance caregivers engaged, get the primary caregiver engaged, get the pastor, the rabbi, the imam engaged, all right, and puts everybody in a triangulated position, that's kind of the drama magnet. Then, look, again, like rock and roll, what can I tell you? Smashing Pumpkins says the world is a vampire. The energy vampire. The energy vampires are all around us. Again, if you know yourself, you have boundaries around yourself, you'll be a lot better off. If, on the other hand, you understand that the world, if you have no boundaries, they're not dealing with your mind and body and spirit, I call it death by 1,000 cuts, you're going to find an energy vampire everywhere you go. That's somebody or something or a situation which drains you of energy, overwhelms you, creates problems, and feeds on the negativity, criticizes and bullies you, okay? I try to help my daughter in some way understand, because I'm a therapist, about the narcissist, the controller, the drama magnet. And I have her understand that most of these people have very low self-esteem, and that's why they do what they do. Well, there's also the person who sometimes is the compulsive liar, tells white lies, constantly manipulates, right? And then the green eye that cannot be happy for anybody's good fortune, right? Plays the victim all the time. And not just the victim, they oscillate between victim and martyr, okay? When they're not in that victim mode. Now, all of these are types of toxic people. But as a psychologist, I can tell you all of them are found also within the constructs of what we call personality disorders. Now, the American Psychological Association will tell you that the about 6 to 8, and it's very underreported, percent of our population has what we call a personality disorder. How a personality disorder comes about, just so you understand, it's really bad parenting. It's about somebody who really did not have a lot of love, connection, social mirroring. That as a child, sometimes they were just tossed things and given things, had no connection, no emotions, whatnot. We put this in a category called the cluster B personality disorders. I'm not going to name all the cluster A, B, and C. D, I'm going to tell you that the cluster B is probably somebody who is very, very toxic, who you may be working with, you may be living with. Unfortunately, we never know until it's too late. Why is that? Well, there's something rare. This is the one diagnosis in our lives that we found as psychologists and social workers and clinicians that truly it comes with a phenomenal image making capability. All right. I have deep compassion. I don't think a child ever wants to be evil. The way a toxic person is created is a poor parenting exercise. Again, like I said, you don't really give them love. You don't reflect at a young age. It's chaos. And I'm sure the person doesn't want to be like that. They then emerge, and it's a 3 to 4 year old we call attachment disorder at the narcissistic stage. As we say in the clinical world, that's time when you should expel your parents out, start seeing yourself as an individual. But they don't. Because they don't have the proper social mirroring, they kind of keep mama and daddy and all the toxic parents that raised them inside them, and they never do. So it's made up of 4 different categories, the cluster B. I call here the narcissist, somebody who has an NPD, narcissistic personality disorder. It's a selfishness taken to its extreme. They can't understand another person's feelings. They don't really have any accountability. They never got attention from their families, right? They have no self-esteem because at 3 to 4 years old, that's when the self-esteem in the world is supposed to teach you something, but you don't develop it. So they have the very low self-esteem and they put an image about it. They have a preoccupation with this image. They want anybody around them. They want to project success, power, brilliance, beauty. Okay. Everything around them is somewhat of a narcissistic supply or an exploitation of others. They don't do this on a conscious level. I want to tell you, I know that everybody thinks that the person in front of them is doing that purposely, nefariously. Well, guess what? This is the way that their brain works, the neural pathways. They're not happy with other people's successes. They really are not. They have a terrible lack of empathy and are arrogant. Does that make sense to some of you? I'm sure it does. I'll give an answer. Anyway, there's 4. There's narcissistic personality disorder. Let me see if I know my diagnoses well enough. There's the histrionic personality disorder. There's the borderline personality disorder, and there's the antisocial. We call them cluster Bs. Really what they are is a relationship disorder. They have a very difficult relationship with themselves and all the people around them. In fact, throughout lives, you'll see that they have a lot of husbands and wives. They have a lot of cheating going on. They go from person to person. They also find, guess who? That which they don't have themselves, the empath or the codependent. There's a difference here. The codependent is what I described to you. The person gets their self-esteem by people, places, and things. I certainly came out of my conflict-driven childhood as the hero child. That's a codependent role. Some come as a scapegoat or a mascot, or the lost child. But I did come out with huge empathy, and I think many of you did. And there's a very difficult, we call dark dyad between these two. The narcissist often finds the empath. Why is that? Well, they need empathy. They don't have it. So they really will take a supply somebody else's. Okay. It's important to understand that the empath is wanting to fix, wanting to heal. I feel your pain. I can change things. I can make it work for you. And the narcissist is saying, whoa, that's pretty cool. I'm just going to take as much as I can until you find me out. And once you do, then all hell will break loose. Because then I need to go find somebody who doesn't. But there's a relationship in psychology we call the empath and the narcissist. I want you to be mindful of it because it finds itself into caregiving relationships. So ask yourself, this is a way to really understand. Now, those people who may have tuned in and do not have somebody they're taking care of that's like that, stay tuned in because guess what? The answer for healthy caregiving is also the answer for dealing with somebody with an attachment disorder. So don't go anywhere. But if you got somebody who drains you, depresses you, it's all about them. They don't support you, right? They have a constant negative energy. Okay. They totally mutually avoidance. They bring the worst out on you when you feel you're walking on eggshells and you're about to be explosive, and they don't respect you. What they do is they value you when they want you, and they devalue you when they've got you. To understand, that's the same thing we do for prisoners of war. God forbid you were one of them. Because what also happens from the prisoner of war context is what we call the Stockholm syndrome, the trauma bond. Why does that happen? Well, you can't leave these people, right? Because sometimes they'll give you crumbs, sometimes they'll give you good things, often they won't. So it's intermittent reinforcement. But that's a sign of a toxic relationship. So I call it TAR. Have you stepped in TAR today? Toxic abusive relationship. Now, you have to understand the toxic person. They are a person with an attachment disorder. They came out of childhood this way. Again, they did not choose to be this way. I have deep compassion for them until they're about 18 years old. And then there's death, mayhem, and murder, and people getting hurt all around them. And then I really do hold them accountable, which is difficult because even in our clinical world, there's not a lot there. But I will want to take you back, not just to them, but to understand them, you also have to understand yourself and why you get hooked into them, okay? And that is because of the brain response we have. And I'm going to get into it a little bit later, but it's called complex PTSD. Now, that's the first 10 years of our lives, literally, that we are parented. Often the narcissist, if they are one, or histrionic or borderline, or whomever they are, probably try to recreate it with you if that was the case. And maybe many of you have done what you needed to do, draw the lines, gotten therapy, really understand who you are. Remember Metallica's words, nothing else matters. And that's cool. But what we emerge, and they do too, by the way, I'd like to tell you that the embodiment of psychology today, which I'm talking about, started in the 1980s with a psychologist by the name of Marsha Linehan. And Marsha Linehan really developed what's called DBT. I'll talk to you about later, dialectical behavioral therapy. And she did it for, guess who? The borderline personality disorder. Nobody could treat them. And that was because she had a very good approach to calm their minds down. Because we all come out of childhood with a fight, flight, or freeze response. Okay, if you came from a high conflict relationship at home, you watched your parents fight, flight, and freeze meant that you kind of didn't feel safe. You don't see the world as being safe. And somehow we all come out with it. Also, there's a fourth F, which we call fawning, which is the codependent response. The first three are biological. A fight is like attack the tiger immediately. Somebody screams, yells at you, I'm going to attack them. Flight is running from the tiger. Freezing is like a possum, right? You hide or you play dead. And then fawn is beg the tiger not to eat you, which is more the codependent response. I have to explain the dyad for you to understand the way out of the high conflict caregiver, because we can't always have the boogeyman there. We can't always keep blaming the other person. In fact, as you're going to find out with the cluster B, they really don't know what they're doing, and there ain't a lot of treatment for them. I hate to say this. So it's important for us to understand what we're doing. I call it the TAR dojo, which is getting in front of them, okay? And it's not fighting with them, by the way, and I'll tell you why in a minute, why that's not great. To get in front of them, I'd like you to understand that the path out is emotional intelligence, okay? Emotional intelligence, if you can educate yourself, energize yourself, and understand emotional intelligence, it's like this. Einstein is brilliant, right? Brilliant. Most of us, I'm sure, are very smart in our own worlds, but until we really understand how to connect with others, how we can manage our own stress, how we can deal with, we're like a diamond, 10 pounds of lead. So emotional intelligence, I think, is more important than IQ. EQ is important, and EQ is necessary for you as a caregiver. A, if you're going through a high conflict caregiving situation. B, if you're just going through that. Now, definitely don't just listen to me today, whether you're getting it from Facebook or on Zoom or wherever. Go and pick up the book if you'd like. Dr. Daniel Goleman is the Harvard University professor. Wonderful, wonderful concept that he talked about with EQ, which is emotional intelligence. Okay. And basically, it's like this. If your emotional abilities aren't in hand, you don't have self-awareness, if you're not able to manage your distressing emotions, if you can't have empathy, have effective relationships, and no matter how smart you are, how good you are as a caregiver, you're not going to get very far. Important to understand. We have to have weaponry, loving, sweet weaponry to worry about life in general. Forget the high conflict person. Okay, this is so critical if we're just going to be a caregiver to have enough emotional intelligence. You may have the most calmest, sweetest caree you're taking care of. Emotional intelligence is still critical. But Dr. Goleman talked about this, that this is the caregiver sort of path in a high conflict situation. I'll get more deeper into it. But rather than start pointing to the caregiver as being insane and impossible and tortuous and absolutely the most abusive, raging person in the world, because you can do that forever. You can also end up with an ulcer. You can also end up very sick with kidney issues. You can do all of that. You're probably going to have to start looking at oneself. That's the point, because that person pretty much ain't going to change. I've been a therapist for almost 30 years, and it's the most difficult patient I've ever had come in my office. And often I'm not sure if they're becoming self-aware, insightful, or just pushing an image on me. So that's why I'm saying, I mean, you all maybe remember the Johnny Depp Amber Heard trial. And so I don't diagnose people. It's not ethical. They're not my patient. But there is 7,000 documents that came out of there. And there was a bunch of psychiatric testing that came out of there. And so really, whatever it is, if you took the psychologist, expert witness, there was a borderline histrionic personality diagnosis there. Well, it doesn't do Johnny any good to go scream, rant, and rave and to jump in the mud to fight. It really doesn't, right? What happens when you fight? With a pig especially, the pig likes it and you get muddy. So understand that to step back, to become self-aware, to become socially aware, right? To become really understanding of relationships and self-management. These are all what Dr. Goleman speaks about, but they're also all, if you're in a high conflict caregiving situation, that you're going to desperately need to pursue. Okay? You're not going to pursue and change that person. And the obstacle to learning this, which I'm going to really ask you big time, if you have this obstacle, is to call a therapist. I'll tell you later about it, but definitely the DBT therapist is who you go to. As I mentioned, Marshall Linhan started in the 80s borderline personality disorder therapy, but a lot of borderlines, just like other cluster Bs, didn't really want to come to therapy. They don't see it. They project, right? It's not their problem. It's always somebody else's. It's the rest of the world. They're the victim and martyr. So what we started doing as psychologists is realizing that Marshall Linhan's work were for attachment issues. And every one of you on this call, including myself, have been raised in a family, not necessarily with full-blown psychopathology, but with different diagnostic indicators of attachment issues. So when you're in a relationship, somebody, sometimes avoidant attachment, I have more of an avoidance style, that's it. But we all do. Marshall's work was really great as dealing with attachment. So if you really think there's obstacles in what you're hearing, and I'm going to say this on the front end, not the tail end of this conversation, I definitely want you to go and find a therapist or a coach who's trained in DBT, who's trauma informed, okay? This is going to be so important for you as you take care of somebody with a high conflict personality. It really is. And the beauty of that is too, is that I can help you do that a lot. I'll tell you now, if you go to psychologytoday.com, okay, I write for that magazine. They have the best search engine I ever saw, ever. All you do is put your zip code in on the front end, just put it in, and out will pop thousands of therapists. Within a 5-mile radius of you, you're going to find 10 or 20. On that 10 or 20, you can look at their resume, their CV, and see if they are trained in trauma. Do not go to anybody who's not, if you're dealing in a high conflict situation, or they're DBT, dialectical behavioral therapists. Okay, that's important. It's easy to find. They're all licensed and credentialed, but read their resume. So why I'm really going down this emotional intelligence path for you is because there's a lot out there that will help you, okay? There's also a lot of different ways. I work in court systems and I do a lot of testimony for high conflict situations. And yes, there's some really interesting people. I'll suggest a social worker named Bill Eddy. He came out with a great book called EAR, which is empathy, attention, and respect. There's a lot of things out there, but the basis I want to convey to you on this conversation today is it takes emotional intelligence to work and live with a person you're taking care of who is either a cluster B or has enough symptoms to be on that scale. Okay. It's personal competence, which is self-awareness. Okay. It's self-management. It's social competence, which is social awareness, and relationship management. So personal competence means you got to understand who you are in these relationships. I'll get to it. You're not the fault, believe me, and you have to take care of them. But this is really the dojo and the whisperer trying to tell you how to take care of them by taking care of yourself. To develop personal competence, it's important. It's important to know your flaws, be vulnerable and faults. It doesn't mean you dwell on them, okay? But acknowledge them, knowing that we're courageous because we're fearful. Acknowledging them is knowing yourself, right? Nothing else matters. Self-awareness is how you can decide what you can and want to change and what you should accept. So if you're with one of these type of conflict people and they start beating on you, right? You don't have to take it. I know you have to be there. I know it's modified contact, but understand every time you fight and every time you bite the bullet, and every time you go down that drama road, you're going to really not be accepting what's really in front of you. You're going to be triggered and you're going to go down a mud hole. Guess what? Let me just give you a clue about the toxic axis 2, the cluster B. They're better fighters than you and me. They are. Okay, they've learned since 3 or 4 years old. They learned in very difficult relationships. They came groomed. So what I'm about to talk to you about with emotional intelligence is more about how to work with them and how to work with yourself. So the first thing, right, was that. Second thing is your self-management. It is so critical if you're in a high conflict relationship to do these things of stress management, breath work, go on, if you can, get respite, vacations, right? You got to be self-motivated. You can't lay there on the couch and get really crazy about things, because every time you do something for yourself as a caregiver, you raise your self-esteem. In dealing with these blamers and shamers, these high conflict people, they always make us feel guilty. Guilt is associated with self-esteem. The higher self-esteem, the lower your guilt. Really, the higher your guilt, then you know you need to take care of yourself, the lower your self-esteem. So if you're feeling terribly guilty and they're shaming and blaming you, check out for a little bit. Go do something. Go take care of yourself. Do some time management stuff. Try to gain a healthy lifestyle. It's going to be the way to do it. All right. The third thing is social competence, which means don't isolate, don't isolate, don't isolate. They're going to try to beat you down. They're going to try to keep you to themselves. Remember what I said? They're jealous of your accomplishments. They want all your energy. They don't want you to be anywhere else. Guess what? You're going to have to be. You're going to have to be. You're going to have to learn social regulation. I'm going to tell you about it soon, because I think that's the key. This is all nervous system work. By the way, Marshall Linehan's Fight, Flight, Fear is all autonomic nervous system work. You don't have to come and see me, pay a lot of money every week to have me, take you down the emotional flashback road. This is where you can actually become your own therapist. And finally, I need you to understand what relationship management is. This is so critical. One of the things I want you to remember all the time when they're high conflict, or they're blaming, or they're shaming, or putting you down, or doing whatever they think that you do, and not even rewarding you for the great work you're doing, I need you to call this the gray rock that you need to become. The gray rock is simply a syndrome of prevention strategy in dealing with high toxic people. Instead of walking on eggshells on the left, I want you to understand that gray rocks and pebbles everywhere around us, but you never notice them, right? None of them attract your attention. Don't remember any specific rock you saw today, do you? That's how you need to become with a high conflict toxic person you're caregiving for. Okay, you cannot offer them supply. Guess what supply is? Supply is the fight. Supply is the fear, the reaction. Supply is your anger, getting wild. Supply is them controlling you to sit there and do nothing for yourself. Okay, you got to be emotionless. You got to be bland. You can't respond. Listen, you're not going to win that war. First of all, they don't even know they're doing that, right? This is who they are. They oscillate between victim and martyr. You do, though. So realize the gray rock technique is one that I want you to really, really start bringing it in. It's really an accepted technique when dealing with cluster Bs. You can find it on YouTube. You can Google it and you'll see the gray rock technique. If you've got somebody who put you down, screams, rants, and raves, it's time for you to be a pebble. Now, why do we stay stuck here? Now, I'm not saying you stay stuck with the caregiver. Listen, I totally understand why you have to have modified contact and why you're taking care of that person. Evil that they may be, mean-spirited, angry, they may not be changing. I know why you're there. I do think you need to bring other people in. I do think whether that's biological family, that's faith-based, that's family of choice, I think you got to do it. If you're the only sole target for one of these high conflict people, you're in deep dog doo. You will have a target on your back. The closer you are with them, the more intimate you are, the more the rage will become, because you'll become the projection. I know this is clinical, of that parent that screwed them over as a child that they could not talk to. So you actually become that. So let me explain to you why we stay stuck. And that's why I want you to look at this. I'm going to give you a way out. Is called complex PTSD. It's not PTSD, which is that, something that's going to happen, God forbid, in your life that's terminal, death-defying, physical, emotional, sexual death in front of us. It is CPTSD. It's why we have a negative self-concept. I'm talking to you about regulation, okay? CPTSD happens in the first 10 years of our life. I always say the definition of CPTSD is when the last 10 years of your life trigger the first 10 years of your life. Okay, that is it. And we walk through life with it all the time. I want you also, again, you may have heard it before, write down this name, Dr. Gabor Mate, M-A-T-E. He's a guru on this, and he's great about CPTSD. He's on YouTube. He's a Hungarian doctor, primary care doctor. He said it, the greatest damage done by neglect, trauma, or emotional loss is not the immediate pain they inflict, but the long-term distortions they induce in the way a developing child will continue to interpret the world. What if you were taking care of your mama and you weren't the favorite? What if you're taking care of your mama, she couldn't stand you the whole time, or your dad, right? That you said, this is your perception. What if you've been taking, which I'm sure you have, you're raised by them, they don't change. This is an adaptive pattern that starts at 4 years old. They may have been there all along. Well, if that's the case, understand trauma is not what happens to you, it's what happens inside of you. And CPTSD is critical to understand for you to work with them. Your complex PTSD, all of us have it. What Gabor also said, and I'm really fortunate and privileged to sit on an advisory board with him at the Polyvagal Institute. I want you to understand this as a caregiver, and I'd love for you to say it 100 times, but even though we only have a few minutes here, is I am 100% responsible for who I am in this relationship. My task is to free myself sufficiently so I can respond in the present moment, not from past programming. That's what freedom is. If they've had you in their clutches for 67 years, that's past programming. For you to show up, mind, body, spirit, with boundaries, be who you need to be, then be a gray rock. That's not challenging. Saying less is more here, doing what you need to do, but staying emotionally and socially regulated, it's better. CPTSD comes from our own adverse childhood experiences, okay? Early adversity has lasting impact. If you have 4 or greater, you likely could be in prison or have real difficult issues in life and have a shorter lifespan. At WellMed, we started learning about our seniors, or those disabled. We come with these adverse childhood experiences that dictate so much to us later. Okay, so adverse child experiences, please look into it. Go to the CDC, the Centers for Disease Control's website, and you'll see it's a study with over 100,000 patients for the last 20 years being done by Kaiser Permanente. This is what CPTSD is. And when you're raised by a narcissist, a histrionic, a borderline, an antisocial mom, dad, or a family member, you can bet you're being triggered with your CPTSD. This is really what happened. You get into a brain fog with these people, and taking care of yourself is important, but adverse childhood experiences is the reason. So complex PTSD is a severe form of PTSD. Okay, it does have emotional flashbacks. So if you're a caregiver going through it, no doubt you've got them. You feel a sense of toxic shame with these people. You also have the same thing of abandonment, and you have this vicious inner critic. This all comes from your upbringing. And chances are you were brought up possibly by the person you're taking care of today. That is so why, in the face of all that darkness, that we still have to take care of ourselves with boundaries. Even if we have to take care of that, it has to be such modified contact We have to learn the gray rock technique. We have to do so much to emotionally regulate that it's critical. They are not going to change. I hate to be the one to tell you this. Okay. Don't expect it. It's like waiting for Godot, if you remember that play. But understand your CPTSD. Now, I had 4 of these guys. I came from a high conflict family. So it could be physical abuse, neglect, household members suffer from mental health issues. Anybody have a depressed mom or dad? Loss of parent due to death or divorce? Yeah, I raised my hand. Emotional abuse, emotional neglect. Parents don't know really sometimes what they were doing. Even the best of them probably are just copying their other parents, which probably didn't get it either. Did you ever watch emotional, physical, domestic violence? All these are adverse childhood conditions. They create the CPTSD. They also create, by the way, that which hooks in to the narcissist. Why is that? Well, it fits us like a glove. Calming down an insane, screaming, raging person is something we did as a child, probably. And it fits us like a glove. That's why we have to adapt adverse childhood experiences, techniques to get out of it, which I call the science of safety. It's your autonomic nervous system. Your nervous system controls your heart, your lungs, okay? It emanates from your brain. It goes through your healing organs into your gut. And it literally is what drives the fight, flight, freeze, and fawn response. So as you're working with a high conflict person, these are the responses to work with. And there's only 2 ways to do it, my caregivers. One is emotional self-regulation, okay? If you're in a toxic, abusive relationship, half of the recipe for making it through it is taking care of your emotional regulation. I'm going to show you how in a second. Stress reduction. I swear to you, that's all it is. Okay. But our autonomic nervous system is so important for us to love and befriend that when we're in the middle of these chaotic relationships with high conflict carees, believe me, we're on fight, flight, freeze. We're walking on eggshells. It's so important for us if we're feeling dysregulated to manage our own self-regulation. And the second half of the puzzle is social regulation. If you're in a toxic, abusive relationship, you've got to find a healthy social circle. It ain't healthy to hang around that person. I know it, yet you probably seemingly have to because you have to do modified contact. So critical to develop people, friends that meet you halfway, friends that have your back, friends that don't manipulate you and game you like they do. Okay? You need to find that. Being isolated is like smoking 15 cigarettes a day. When you're taking care of a person in a high conflict place, we tend to want to isolate. They want to isolate you. This is the point of them. They want to own you, possess you. You've got to find social regulation. Now, I will say this. I'm not saying they're throwaways either. I don't think they're going to get too well, but I do think they too, Marshall Linehan's work was also to emotionally regulate the borderline and also to find social regulation for the temporal lobes for the borderline. Then guess what? Yeah, your caree also will benefit from this. I work with couples. There's one that is an insanely rageful spouse. I know her well. They've been in therapy for a while. And literally, if I actually get her to walk outside and hike or go onto a mountain, because her family were farmers, she actually calms down. She doesn't calm down by people. People trigger her to become rageful. But she calms down out in the spaces of a mountain or a river. That's her autonomic nervous system deal. So even if there are a cluster B, they too will benefit from emotional regulation and social. And you can teach them breath work if you want. Now, if you are really in these relationships, I want you to start understanding to get out of them is start to build bridges to your brain. Your brain has been conditioned for years by them. It can be unconditioned by you. It's called neuroplasticity. It's the rewiring of our own brain. It's how the complex PTSD gets healed. Guess what? As you do that, you develop resilience, okay? As you take care of yourself and you learn from mistakes and you don't dwell and go put yourself down, but you grow from them. You get acceptance from them. You become optimistic. You hang around healthy people. And most of all, if you can start taking care of your stress reduction, you're going to find out you can rewire the brain. Okay, we're going to do breath work. If you've ever checked into my work here, you know we're going to do breath work at the end. That is a rewiring of the brain. I do it with policemen, firemen, emergency medical technicians, but for caregivers like you, you're also first responders. your family first responder. So breath work is the way to do it. I'm also going to give you a choice of whether you want to do breath work or maybe just want to pray or meditate or go to a safe place. Why all that? Because those also retrain the brain. So if you're in a high conflict care-e relationship and you need to emotionally regulate, guess what that is called? Stress reduction. That's it. I know you think it's not really, you hear it all the time, and I'm tired of hearing about it. This is what raises your self-esteem. This is what lowers your guilt. This is what rewires your brain. This is what tells yourself that you love yourself. This is your hug, the hug you probably never got from that person. Okay. Then, like I mentioned to you before, I want you to find yourself a trauma-informed DBT therapist. They are the best to work with CPTSD. Okay. They teach mindful sort of things. They do what's called EMDR, which is kind of a rapid eye move desensitization, which allows trauma to leave the body. They teach you emotional regulation, how to deal with distress tolerance and interpersonal effectiveness. Guess what all that is? That's Daniel Goleman's work. That's emotional intelligence. And your therapist, who could be your transformational coach, can help you rewire the brain. He or she's only going to be a coach. So as we wind down this presentation, and it's a lot, I know you're drinking from a fire hose, and I bet you wish I could throw some pixie dust and silver bullets and get rid of that person's terrible disposition that you're taking care of right now. But unfortunately, it's more us, because even as a therapist who runs treatment centers, I've yet to see a strong, effective program to deal with the cluster B. Okay. They're just never wrong in their minds. They aren't, right? But you can start doing it. And now there's 2 places now, which are basically cost little or nothing. It's not going to ask you to go anywhere, but you can start the process immediately. Okay. One is the CPTSD Foundation. Now, you see the website in the bottom right there? If you're looking at it, it's cptsdfoundation.org. They're great. They are really great. They're very inexpensive. You can access a lot of things, meditations. They've got trauma support. They've got, people going through exactly what you're going through, high conflict relationships. And they say it best, trauma, complex PTSD is a fact of life. It does not, however, have to be a life sentence. So Peter Levine is a wonderful somatic trauma therapist that sits also in the Polyvagal Institute. But here, I'm just saying this. I'm not sending you out to do something expensive here. Go to the CPTSD Foundation. It'll start helping you help yourself through Daniel Goleman's work, through your work with a dialectical behavioral therapist. They do also have therapists on the phones that they can help you with. They've got support. But there you go. Take that step. And the other is what I had to do. Codependency Anonymous. I came out with a fight, flight, freeze, and fawn response. My sister did too, just like you. And I started becoming a recovering hero child. So strengths developed through codependency, if you can actually do this, and go online to coda.org, coda.org. Okay, these are the people, places, and things that really give us our self-esteem. When we're in a high conflict situation, that person is going to define who we are. That's why I keep saying to you, just know who you are. So have that CPTSD therapist, have that codependency group, because even these groups, even post-COVID, they're all co-regulating together. They really are. They're developing resiliency together. So that's 2. It's not going to cost you anything, either one. Go to the cptsdfoundation.org and go to coda.org. That's a great start. And start knowing who you are, because nothing else matters. Okay, start emotionally regulating, start socially regulating, respecting yourself, that you're not going to take that devaluation of that other person. Now, you're not going to fight with them. You're not going to jump into the mud with them because they have a black belt in that. But what you're going to see them as a gift to start emotionally regulating in the moment. We're getting around some healthy people. But to do all that, you got to understand Brene Brown's work with boundaries. That's creating a safe vessel. A vessel where you can actually do the emotional regulation, social regulation, CPTSD work, and say no when you need to say no. Boundaries are not mean. Boundaries tell the person in front of you who you are. Okay. When we fail to set boundaries and hold people accountable, we feel used and mistreated. Brene's all over YouTube. Please look. Ultimately, CPTSD is a parenting issue. All of us tried our best, even me in my 60s now with a kid, and it's a parenting issue. All of us have it. What do we need to do to get out of it? Reparent ourselves. Not to say I love you so many times, because again, you know, I testify in court and I see felons saying that, but being fair, consistent, and available with ourselves. Okay. Tapping into ourselves, taking this parenting energy that we have to change the world, that we have to help narcissists we think get better, even though they never will, of course. And what we have to understand is we have to reparent ourselves. That is the point of high conflict kind of resolution. Every time you hear that negativity, that insult, that person is obstinate, it's time to reparent yourself, to hug yourself, to go do something that's going to be a gray rock in the moment and feed your neural pathways later. But understand a journey of 1,000 miles begins with a single step. It literally does. It's always going to be 3 forward and 2 backwards. Be content. Love yourself. Forgive yourself. We can't do this. It took 10 years, I always say, to get into that situation. It takes 70 years to get out. Okay, but it's a healing time. It's abundance. Understand that the interventions for this work, when you're dealing with a high conflict situation, are not going to come from the head. I hate to tell you this. I know you're listening to me and it's going in one ear and out the other sometimes. It's going to come from the heart. The longest trip you ever take is from your head to your heart, which means you can read all the books you want on high conflict. Guess what? You got to do the work. You got to do the breath work. You got to walk. You got to do the Pilates. You got to do things, to crochet, the things that passion you up, to shift the neural pathways, because we never see things as they are. We see them as we are. Make sense? We don't see things as they are. We see them as we are. Certainly the borderline, the personality disorder, the narcissist will never see things as you do. They're going to see things through very victim-driven eyes, very low self-esteem eyes, and often transactional eyes, meaning their love and their hoovering to you is more a means to an end. That's not the love I know you guys provide. Love yourself in a very unconditional way and realize that you can't control them. Grant yourself the serenity, accept the things you can't change, the courage to change the things you can, and the wisdom to know the difference. You can't change the toxic individual's brain. I'm a therapist. I've tried for years. Not working. Okay. But you can. You can control how you respond. And that's the beauty of neuroplasticity. So I am so glad you tuned in. It's a beginning. It's a beginning to say, don't keep fighting with them. You're never going to win it. It's a beginning to say that they're telling you that you need to get in touch with your own stuff, that this is a wonderful path for you to learn who you are, and then nothing else matters. It also is a great path to really deal finally with those choices we make because of complex PTSD. Okay. Now, the modified contact, there's a lot of things you can do. Bring other people in, get faith-based people in. It's obviously you're going to have to pay a lot of sacrifices to the caree. You have to bring them a lot of things. You have to give them a lot of compliments. You know, that's kind of the management of part. But that's all they're going to take is that narcissistic supply. But for you, you do not have to have that mask on. Halloween's coming up. We don't have to wear this mask for 365 days. For you to embrace CPTSD work is to become authentic and quit producing and directing. Okay. And here's a great way to learn. Let's do some breath work. This is something which changes the brain. It allows you to become proactive instead of reactive. It literally is something that if you do in the moment will calm yourself. If you do it over time, it literally shifts and changes the neural pathways. That is why in a high conflict situation, you literally can be your own trauma therapist. I'm asking you to go get a trauma therapist, but I'm doing that so they can be more of a transformational coach with you, so they can actually keep you in line with the emotional regulation techniques and the social regulation techniques. Not that they have to hear what happened at 3 or 4 years old, because that's an emotional flashback. Frankly, I'm doing it so you can have somebody there. The beauty of this work and dealing with high conflict people is the answer is in our hands. It's when we're feeling dysregulated, and they dysregulate the living hell out of us, don't they? How do we get regulated? Okay, when we're feeling negative and they're dragging around, they have no gratitude, or we feel entitled. We're feeling hopeless and depressed. We're feeling lonely and disengaged. How do we then shift it and become more encouraged? Well, it's not about them, y'all. It's about our emotional regulation. That's how we engage. And breath work, which we're going to do now, is really the one way our species could do it. No other species can really calm the vagus nerve, which goes from the cortex of your brain into your healing organs, into your gut, and calm you. Okay, we're the only ones that could. The Polyvagal Institute was started by an anthropologist, not a psychologist. And he said it right. Survival was not survival of the fittest for mankind. It was because we could emotionally regulate and hang around in communities and socially regulate. Other species couldn't. So if you're with a high conflict person and you need to just take a chill pill, I'm not asking to get on top of a mountain and meditate for an hour. I'm saying, do you got 80 seconds? In high conflict situations, always say to the person, can we please stop fighting? I'm going to come back in 80 seconds. I'm just going to go do some breath work. And I teach the other person, no matter how much they may be difficult to teach, I say, why don't you breathe while I'm gone too? It's called 4-7-8. And I teach them how to breathe. And then they come back together after 80 seconds, and they reset. Okay. So this is vagus nerve work. There's other vagus nerve work that I can show you, but today I want you to know that breath work will ground you on 2 feet when you're walking on eggshells with these people. Breath work will transform your chemistry of your body, and it brings control back to you. They're not going to bring control back to you. They're going to keep you on one leg. They're going to keep you teetering in the wind. How do you put 2 feet down? Breath work. Okay. It's a grounding technique. All right. Cops do it before they go into SWAT situations. You should do it before you start taking care of that high conflict family member. You can unlock the power of your own vagus nerve. Okay. We don't do it enough. Look at the scans on the right. They all shift and change. Our brains are malleable. We can train them. We can retrain them. It's called neuroplasticity. Thank you, Dr. Linehan, in the 80s. She couldn't find enough borderlines to do this work, but found out that we all needed it. So the ones who've been here before know about 4-7-8. It's Dr. Andy Weil brought it. Those who don't want to do, I do believe in the autonomy of you. I believe in your boundaries. If you don't want to do breath work, here's some alternatives. Number one, you can pray. Sure. Praying is an actual sort of neural pathway retraining tool. It's a grounding technique. You can be silent if you don't want to pray. You can go to a safe place you once were. You can touch it, feel it, and smell it. Okay. But for those who want to develop an evidence-based program, literally calm yourself in the moment with a very high conflict carry that you're taking care of, I'd love for you to start learning breath work with Dr. Weil. So after we get done, less than 80 seconds, I'm going to return this all back to you. I'd love for you to write down Dr. Weil's name, W-E-I-L, and go on YouTube and put 4-7-8, and he'll pop up. He does a 2-minute video. He is so, isn't he cute? That beard and stuff. I had the pleasure 25 years ago once working with him. He's a good man. And if you go to drweil.com, drweil.com, you'll find out more cool things by him. But right now, I want you to know that this may be the most important regulating device you're ever going to have when you go back to that devaluing, maybe insulting, difficult person in your life that you're taking care of. And God love you. You're doing sacred stuff. Get smart, though. Don't work harder. Get other people engaged, right? Be the gray rock that you need to be. Don't bite the bait. Don't become reactive. Take care of yourself, mind, body, spirit in the process, and do a lot of breath work. Okay, so when I ask you to breathe in and close your eyes, you'll breathe in through your nostrils for 4 seconds. It's refreshing. It's cool. I'd love you to keep it and swish it in your mind for up to 7 seconds. You can picture peace or serenity. Again, you're going to do this. You're going to excuse yourself from that person too when they're doing it to you. But when you exhale, I want you to exhale for 8 seconds. Do it loud. Do it so the dogs, cats, and then even your loved one can hear you like this. That's what triggers the vagus nerve response. And we all know this is a physiological response with tremendous outcomes, and it can shift your brain. But it's also extraordinarily important tool as you deal with a high conflict relationship. So let's close our eyes. I've given you alternatives if you don't want to do it. Those who do, I'd love for you to do this now in the moment, but maybe 4 to 6 times a day. Yeah, I'm sure you can do it. That'll shift your brains. Okay, so with your eyes closed, your feet on the ground, if you got shoes on, feel the floor through your shoes. If you're barefooted, feel the floor through your feet. Let's do 4-7-8 together. Okay, let's breathe in now through our nostrils for 4 seconds. Keep it, swish it around for up to 7 seconds. Now, blow out all the anxiety you got for 8. Breathe in the calmness for 4 seconds. Keep it, swish it around for up to 7 seconds. Now, blow out with passion for 8. Breathe in the calmness again for 4 seconds. Keep it, swish it around for up to 7 seconds. Now, blow out with gusto for 8. Last time. Breathe in for 4 seconds. Keep it, swish it around for up to 7 seconds. Now, blow out all the stress and anxiety you're feeling at the moment for 8. With your eyes still closed, feet on the ground, go inside your body, scan it, okay? Think about mother, father, brother, sister. I would like you to right now, the high conflict individual, the devaluing one, the one that doesn't say thank you, doesn't connect with you, that doesn't hold and hug you. And realize that at this moment, you shifted the chemistry of your body. You can do it when you're with them. You produced oxytocin, which is a hormone that connects your neurotransmitters. You can do that all in less than 80 seconds. Just step away from the conflict. Don't bite the bait and go and breathe. And when you're ready now, open your eyes and come back to this wonderful meeting that the Charitable Foundation has set up and realize, look, we weren't dealt great hands. If you had a good therapist, do the grief work for the loved one you didn't get. In the meantime, I want you to know that this breath work is self-compassion. And a moment of self-compassion can change your entire day. A string of moments like this literally can change the course of your life. Don't let them define you. Don't let them insult you. Don't let them devalue you. Learn a strategy of emotional intelligence. Be very kind to yourself and be the change you want to see in all others, okay? Know that emotional intelligence is not the triumph of heart over head. It's a unique intersection of head and heart. So pursue it. Don't engage. Take your oxygen first. Be the change you want to see and know that better things are coming. They are. Keep calm, and just breathe. Glenda, that's all yours.
Thank you so much, Dr. Jamie, and thank you for that wonderful presentation, just jam-packed, full of information. And I'll always love the 4-7-8 breathing technique. So thank you for that. We are already out of time, but let me tell you, we have one more Caregiver Teleconnection session in the month of August. It's almost over, everybody. I'll be back with you Tuesday, August the 30th at 1 o'clock Central Time. And Dr. Natalie Oliver is going to be back with us. She's going to be talking about dementia and the hidden patient. Sounds like a really interesting topic to me. And I also want to tell you that the Caregiver Teleconnection calendar for September will be out if it's not posted already. We have 11 sessions for you in the month of September. That's a lot of sessions and a lot of topics and presenters that you can choose from. So once again, Dr. Jamie, thank you. And all of you, we certainly are glad you are with us today, and especially those people out on Facebook for the first time of us streaming live. So thank you very much. And I will put contact information for Dr. Jamie on the follow-up email that you will be receiving in a couple of days so that you can reach out to him since we did not have time for questions and comments.
Glenda, would you,
Yes.
can I say one thing to everybody?
You absolutely can.
So I have a fabulous opportunity that I consult to a group, okay? And I'm putting it into the place right now. Can everybody see the chat? And if you can't, you can put it in. It's called tardtales.org, which is toxicabusiverelationship.org. If you go to that website, okay, you can put in your story. You can also have an alias. You can change your name. You can do what you want. And Tard Tales is getting stories of toxic abusive relationships all around the world. We've gotten them from Russia, from Hungary, from Romania, from America. And anybody who has it, please, please, please feel free to go there. It's a nonprofit, it's a charity, and we'll take the stories. One day we'll hopefully get some public policy change. So forgive me if you have a story to tell. You can make sure that you, as I said, can change your name up, do whatever you'd like, but feel free to tell it at hardtails.org. Thank you, Glenda.
Thank you so much, Jamie, and get some rest. Hope
Me
to see y'all on our next session. If not, whenever it's convenient for you, we'd love to have you back. Thank you so much for joining us today. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Be kind to yourselves.